Welcome to Len's show, and it's so exciting to be here today with you. And Len's show is a bi-monthly show being aired out through YouTube and maybe some other channels once we get going. Of course, it's experimental and we don't know what we're doing at all, but hopefully we'll pull everything together. And it's so exciting. Oh. Ben's just knocking out some sound there. Yeah, of course we're live, so we're going to mess up. There's going to be lots of mistakes. It's the first time we've done this, and you can see just as you look around, like look at the set that we've built and got ready, and we've got multiple cameras. We can talk to you around. Isn't that exciting? The goal is to create short form content so we can release something on a weekly basis. It's only quite short, like 5 minutes, 6 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes. And instead of my usual 1 hour rambles about things, something that's quick and easy for people to digest. And of course, being an educator, this is all about education. So I really want to concentrate on teaching things through here rather than having that sort of self-enjoyment of just putting on a show. The goal is to create educational content about photography, about things that I'm interested in, and of course about things that you are interested in. Now we've got quite a few different segments to our show, and today we're just trialing a few of them just to see how they go, how they fit in, what it's actually like to live stream. You know, whether we've got our lighting right, whether we've got our cameras right, whether we've got our communication going properly. And of course, behind the scenes here we have Ben from Leap Films actually controlling the live stream, and we're so thankful for that, to make it feel and look much more professional. Some of the things that we hope to cover in Len's show, of course, composition is one of them. How we process things, that's going to be another really big thing. You all know I'm really excited about turning your photographs into real prints, so that'll be another large part of the show, is trying to get people to print work and share that enthusiasm that I have for printing. So exciting. We're also going to cut through to little excerpts with the interviews and the conversations that I'm having with Bree over at a creative affair, so you can actually see some of the fascinating conversations we're having about the creative life and that creative process. What else are we going to have on there? Oh, we're going to do some lens and camera reviews as well, and you might see I've got one sitting here, and so later today I want to talk about this little beautiful camera there. So before we start, we would love your feedback and to hear from you. And of course, there's probably only a small handful of you there today because we haven't started promoting this, and the guests and members of Lens Club are the first people to be invited into this. You can, if you're logged into YouTube, you can send us a message through the chat function there. So if you want to send some encouragement and some love our way, of course we'd absolutely love to appreciate that. So for today, our first episode, we only have a few things on for you. We're going to start off with a segment on post-processing, and I've asked members of Lens Club to send through some images, so I'll be post-processing some of those into monochrome for you. And we probably won't get through everyone's, and I might do another one of those in one of our Tuesday nights. We're also going to look at composition, and we're going to have a little segment on composition, and to wrap up we're going to do a quick discussion about this beautiful monochrome camera that I've got in front of me. Well, without further ado, let's go over to some post-processing. Isn't this fantastic? Surrounded by my cameras and my beautiful books back there, and got the laptop here ready to do some processing. And thank you so much for sending in some of these photographs. Let's dive in to some of them and see what we can do. Now, we've got this lovely magenta hover thing so that you can actually see where I'm pointing the camera, the mouse it is, isn't it, while you're sitting there. And let's have a look at this photograph here. It's put in by Julie Brown there, and let's have a look at it in colour. Absolutely gorgeous photograph in colour, isn't it? And but we're going to take it to monochrome today, and I'm processing in Lightroom, where my favourite software is, and where I find it much easier to do it. I'm going to start from scratch and basically just put it into black and white, and I've been using the shortcut key there, V, to get across to there. Now, I'd love to see this flower pop a little bit more, and of course I'm only processing it to my vision, and you might like to process it to a very, very different vision. And if we come in here and really start pushing up the clarity, we can see that the flower does some really beautiful things, but it changes the background dramatically as well, doesn't it? So what I would like to do is to separate out those two areas just through some very simple masking. So I'm just going to come in, select the subject, and look, with its AI features now, it does an incredibly good job of just selecting the flower, and we can add quite a little bit of clarity and texture there. And let's also see whether changing the shadows is going to do very much. And yes, opening up the shadows does a little bit in there, and I'm just going to open the whites. Now, as I'm sliding the white slider, I also keep an eye on my histogram up here to see what's happening. And as I bring it across, I almost want it to hit the end there, just to bring up pure white. And we can actually turn on the warning slider there, and you may notice that it's actually put a few little, see those little red dots there? That's where I've hit the end of the whites. And I might just back it back just a little bit, because I like to have it just at that very, very edge. Isn't that just so gorgeous? Now let's just close that mask, and let's add another one. So I'm just going to create another mask, exactly the same. Select the subject, only this time I'm going to invert it, so I've got the background, and here I'm actually just going to drop some of the clarity and a little bit of that sharpness in the background, and maybe even a little bit of the texture to work that way. Now, isn't that just so nice? Let's close that one. Now, I'm just going to go back to the grid mode and rotate the flower upside down and have another look at it. And as you'll notice as you're looking at it, there's quite a bright spot over there, and this is actually going to be the right hand side, but on the left hand side here we've got quite a strong bright spot. So I'm going to just tackle that as well, and otherwise I'm going to leave this because I really love it how it is. So let's create a new mask. This time I'm going to come in with a linear gradient and fade it off. You can see it'll be quite strong to here, and then it'll start fading off to 0 here. You'll notice that the mask is cutting into the flower, so I'm actually going to subtract the subject, and you can see there now that mask is only working on the background, and it's subtracted that lovely flower there. Now I can actually come in here, and it's very tempting just to grab exposure and slide it over, but I'm actually not going to do that. I'll put that back on 0 by double clicking on the word. I'm just going to try dropping the highlights and definitely dropping the whites over there, and maybe even increasing the contrast. And you can see by doing that I'm actually keeping a fair bit of the texture in that area, and I can also bring this over a little bit more if I like. How are we going there? And let's just drop that exposure a little bit more. Yes, almost there. One more of those on top. I like to add them on top of each other so that they're in different spots. So if I'm just going to really pull down the darkness there to try and match what's going on the other side, I'll do another one that's a little bit different from the first one. And how's that looking? That's really, really beautiful, isn't it? There is a little bit of a brightening on this side over here. We could deal with that in two ways. One could be with a little bit of cropping, or maybe even just a little bit of vignette. So we'll see if that sort of darkens off a little bit there, just with a little bit of vignette. How's that going there? Beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. Interestingly, Julie here has actually submitted a high key flower as well, and I thought it would be interesting to have a look at this one. Now let's just have a quick look at it in colour. You'll notice that there's some lovely pinks in the background and a little bit of beautiful purples and greens and yellow there as we come across, and we have some of that gorgeous texture in the background. There are lots of different ways we could go with this. One would be we could actually lift the whites and remove the background by doing that. Now let's turn off the warning. Now when we do that, and if we go in really close, we'll start to see that we've lost a fair bit of the image, and I definitely wouldn't want to do that, because these bits of flowers are quite gorgeous. And look at the background there. It's a lovely subtle background, isn't it? Just noticing on my screen there it's a little bit pink, but that must just be the calibration of the monitor there. What could we do with this one? What happens if we just gently start to bring in some more blacks? Well, that's quite interesting. What happens if we add a little bit of clarity? Oh, that's getting quite nice, isn't it? Let's just go back to the colours, and we could make the purples darker and the yellows a little bit brighter, and we can do that by coming into the mix here. We can click on one of the purple stamens and just drag that up, and we can lighten those if we would like, and or we could actually darken them just a little bit. And then we can also do the same, and if we get the right spot, we hopefully get some of those yellows and lighten up the middles there just a delicate amount. Isn't that quite lovely? Sometimes after doing something like that, and we've put up the clarity, I also put up the texture, I often just come back and play with the middle of the curve. So I'm not changing the whites or the blacks, but I'm just looking at the middle tones to find that really lovely spot where it seems to jump out for me. Now that's quite beautiful. I might also, knowing that the stems, and we can just look at them a little bit green and brown, we could actually come in and actually try darkening the greens a little bit. Well, that's nice, and the browns are actually oranges, aren't they? So let's just have a little play there. Beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. Now, whether we want a little bit more tone in the background or not is possibly worth considering. So let's just select the background. I haven't actually tried this slider yet. Let's this selection. Oh, I don't like that one. So let's just delete it. Let's try selecting the subject. See if it does a better job. It's still missing a few bits there. Let's turn it around and let's just add some more contrast and dehaze into the background there. Oh, what's happening there? I've done something. Something's gone wrong. Let's delete it. Okay, let's select the subject. Let's invert it. See, look, I've accidentally got a few little bits of the flower there, so I'll come in with a brush and just make sure we're on subtract and subtract some of those bits back out, and I'm just going to increase my flow, bring down my size a little bit, and knock out where it's picked up in the background there in the mask. That's it. And there's a little bit in here that has picked up as well. There we go, and there's one there. And it seems to have missed a little bit in there, but let's hopefully that maybe might not matter too much. So let's increase the contrast and just drop the exposure just a little bit and just bring a tiny little bit of that texture into the background. And let's close that one. How are we going there? Interesting. Very, very interesting. What a beautiful, beautiful photograph. There's one thing now I'm looking at it that I'm not too sure about, and that's the darkening of the leaves, the petals. I'm just going to try lightening them a little bit and see if I can get something in there. And I would like to just add a little bit more texture and sharpness and maybe a little bit more clarity into the plant there. How's that looking? That's beautiful, isn't it? What two gorgeous photographs there, Julie. Thank you for sharing those with us. All right, let's have a look at this one here, and Judy's sent this one in, and let's take that over to develop and have a bit of a play with that. Isn't this beautiful? And oh, there's some things that we can have a bit of a play with here. Intuitively, I know that clarity is going to be one of the ones with this slide, and just by moving my clarity slider to each end, I can actually get an idea of what's going on. So if I move it to the left end, reducing clarity, which is it's mid-tone contrast. Notice that the sky is getting really smooth and dreamy, and the house has got that lovely old sort of soft focus feel. And then if I move it up the other way, I can have that really crisp look, and where we get the detail of all the beautiful pieces of wood there. And the sky has also become more gritty. And what I thought I would do is actually show you how to do both into the same photograph, just with a little bit of masking. And I'm going to go with this much more punchier look, which I've been quite excited about lately. And an easy way to do that is just come in and select the sky, and oh, it hasn't done such a good job there, so let's delete that. Let's just try again and select the subject. Look, it does so much better selecting the subject, and we can add to this with a big brush. We can make that brush quite large. We can have the flow coming right out of it. We've got auto mask, and we can just add to that quite easily in through there. And we've now got the building quite easily sorted there. And we can add that texture and clarity into the building, and maybe open up the shadows there. And lift that up as bright as we feel comfortable with. Look, that's glowing really beautifully there, isn't it? Love it. Now let's do the sky. So we create a new mask. Select sky didn't work so well, so we're going to do the same thing. We select the subject. We're going to invert it, and we're going to subtract with a brush these bits down here that we don't want to be playing with from that mask. Now, got to be quite careful I don't catch some of those things, but let's just drop some of the clarity in the sky and also push up some of that contrast there, and maybe even pull the shadows down a little bit to get a bit of a different sky going on there. How's that looking? That's quite lovely, isn't it? I could also come in with another mask, and let me add some darkening at the top left hand side up there to just help bring our eye down this way. And instead of doing it all, I'm just going to darken the blacks a little bit, and maybe the shadows, and I'm doing that to leave the highlights alone as I'm doing that, because I'm just trying to darken it down without being too aggressive. Or I will just toggle in just a tiny little bit of extra there. That's quite nice, isn't it? You'll notice that the grass there in the front is quite bright, isn't it? Quite bright. And so that's something that I would like to brush down, and I'm not going to go in full strength with this, but I'm just going to add in the mask in the front here just to take out a little bit of clarity and pull down the whites and the highlights, just to knock off the brightness in that area. And to darken it down, I'm just going to add some more blacks in there. Oh, that's getting nice, isn't it? Let's try and find a nice balance in there with those things. Beautiful. Isn't that just so beautiful? Now, as we're looking, I'll also wander around, and I notice there's actually quite a strong piece of white here on the edge. So if we want to keep it exactly the same shape or not, it's obviously a personal preference, but let's just see what happens if we come in there and take out just a little bit of that brightness. There's a little white spotty there too, and I'm just going to try on the other side of that and see how that goes. How's that looking there? I would really like to do something with that spot there, so I'll just create another little bit of mask, come in here and just brush in this little tiny place and see if I can drop out the whites again and maybe the highlights, just to pull that back a little bit. And I find that contrast is actually working quite well to knock those down. How's that looking now? We have quite a strong brightness on the left-hand side of the building, and that's another little area that we could probably work on as well. And I'm just going to put a radial gradient over that part of the building and just see if I can pull down some of that brightness just a little bit in that area, and see if it's going to affect everything else too much. Oh, that worked quite well, didn't it? How's that going now? Quite nice. There's a few other little things I'd like to do, and that is to just brush in to some of these bits in the middle here. I'm just going to turn up my density and flow, make my piece a little bit smaller and a little bit less feather, and I'm just going to delete that and start it again. We're going to add with the brush and just to paint in some of these doors and windows in here, and maybe this one here as well, and just open up the highlights there just a little bit, and maybe even bring in some whites to bring a little bit more attention to them. So in darkening off the left-hand side and bringing more light into the middle, I'm trying to bring the attention into that part of the photograph a little bit more. And I'm tempted to do that again with my brush, just darkening down some of these bits just a touch more. I found also by adding contrast I've been able to do some nice darkening. There we go. Close. Now hopefully we've got a lovely balance of the tones right across the whole image. You could maybe come in with a little bit of vignette if you feel like it, to help bring the eye in. I used to be really vigorous with my vignettes, and I've seemed to have backed them right off. I'm not sure that I would need to do that too much with this one. There does seem to be, I seem to have created a bit of a problem down here. Can you see that as a problem? In my darkening of the bright bits, I've ended up with a grey mush down there, and I'm going to be lazy and deal with that by just cropping out a little bit of it there, and brushing in a little bit of clarity or texture or something. Let's see, maybe contrast will help, and just dropping the exposure to try and hide where I've messed up there. Huh. How's that looking? Quite beautiful. This bit of iron down here is quite bright and really captures our attention, doesn't it? Whether that you would like that to be the main part of the photograph or not is definitely up to you, but let's just try darkening some of those little bits down just a little bit again, and there's always that one there, and I'm just going to pull down the highlights, the whites a little bit, and increase the contrast a little bit there. And how are we looking there? That's sort of just taken off that little part as a bit of distraction. I really also love, look how many masks I've added here. I must have going a bit crazy with my masking, haven't I? I'm just going to come down through the this gorgeous chimney and see if I can just lift it just a tiny little bit to make it a little bit brighter. There we go. Let's have a look that nice and large, and hopefully our eye dances all around this incredibly beautiful photograph. The masking over here on the left isn't as good as I would like. I might reconsider and fiddle with that little bit if I was going to print this and do something else with it. Okay. How's that for some processing? I think we've got some time for some more. Look at all the lovely work that's been sent in. I was interested by this one. Chris has sent this one in. Isn't that just fascinating and beautiful there? Now this is quite an interesting image for me to consider. We've got quite a brand new sort of wheel on the left here, and this lovely old vehicle, and quite a modern light fitting down here. And I was sort of wondering, we also have quite a strong piece of brightening over here. So I thought maybe that a bit of cropping might be interesting on an image like this, and to see what happens if we actually remove some of those spots. Let's have a look there. Now, if you wanted to keep it a set size, remember you can actually select and maintain a particular aspect ratio, the one that you shot it in, if that's what you would like to do. Now I'm not sure about that down there, and let's have a look if we come across this way. And how's that looking as a bit of a crop there? And one of the questions to ask is, can we get away with this light coming in here and with what's happening down here as part of that? This would actually, one way of doing it would be even to come up tighter on the bottom there and see what's happening. Let's unlock it and make it longer and narrower, and let's try chopping in to the other light and see how it goes. Let's have a look there. I've really taken to this one, haven't I, with my quite strong cropping there. And lately I've been getting really excited about quite dark and strong processing there. How's that getting in there? Lots of contrast, pulling down the blacks, and yes, I'm finding I've because of how much I've got over there, I'm getting a quietly distracted. How's that looking now? Oh, I quite like that one. What I'm going to do is just create a virtual copy, go back to this one, and let's remove the crop totally and have another look at it without the crop, and see what other options we've got with that really, really interesting crunchy processing. As you know how much I love my squares. Let's see what happens if we go square. Look, I caught that wheel there. Let's move that over a little bit there. Oh, now that's quite an interesting version as well, isn't it? Have we got any highlights? A little bit of the whites come out there. Just pull back the white. Ah. Oh, I'm quite liking that now, Chris. Very much so. There's a little white spot down there, and I'm going to put it on healing and make this nice and small and see. It's just there. Let's remove that out of the photo. Let's have a look now. Is that... There's still a tiny little dot there, isn't there? Ah, there we go. Let's fix that little dot out. Oh, I'm really liking that one. Really, really liking that. And I just have an intuition to go down and just bring in a little bit of more vignette on there and see what happens. Oh, yes, I quite like that crunchy feel to it. Let's just move it over and see what happens if we have a little bit more of the light in. Let's try a little bit more. Let's take it back the other way. So we actually put some on the edge. Oh, we've got that wheel now, that's no good. How's that there? Let's put them both up side by side and have a bit of a look and see some different versions coming up. And often I will keep going, making multiple versions and seeing what's happening. And right now I'm quite excited by that incredible crunchy look. So beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, some more processing. Let's have a look at this one. This one's given to us by Graham to be processed in colour. Let's have a look at the colour. Oh, look how beautiful and vibrant that is. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. To get to there, I just used the V button. And all my settings are at 0 in the processing here. Rather than using presets, we'll do that another day to play with some presets. One way to take this is to push this into you know, something very, very, very strong and crunchy, and I'm just going to do that to sort of show you sort of quickly some of the options there. Isn't that quite amazing how you can change that quite dramatically? But for me, I'm really attracted to the delicateness and the lights that I'm actually already seeing in here, and I quite like it in this really lovely bright mode that we've got here. And let's just come in a little bit gently with these things and see if we can bring things up just slowly. Now, it's quite nice what it's doing to the gate, isn't it? Now, do we want to do it to the gate and the trees at the same time? I'm actually thinking that we should do them independently of each other. Do you think the artificial intelligence is able to pick up the gate? That was hoping too much, wasn't it? Of course it won't. Well, let's add to that mask with our brush, and we'll pull down it. And we've got the auto masking on. And let's just grab some of this fence and see whether we can grab different bits of it. Actually, Ben brought over his Whatcom. That would probably be a good thing for doing this with. Oops. That accidentally picked up the whole thing and moved it. That wasn't too good, was it? Okay. There we go. A bit more down there. Let's run a few more of these over across. And then so what I'm doing here, and I'm going to add another one over the top, and I'm going to use a radial gradient as well, is seeing whether I can just work on the gate without too much on everything else. I just need to sit back and have a look and actually get a sense of where it's going. Yeah, that's quite nice, isn't it? And bring in a little bit more contrast, and this I'm now working globally, trying to find that lovely balance of what's happening in there. And we all remember we had the green grass, and we can just press to see where the green was. We can always darken and lighten that green globally. So if we would like it to be just a little bit darker, and then the leaves, let's have a quick look what colour they are. They're yellowy orange. Let's just try bringing those down as well. All right, that's quite nice, isn't it? I would just have a go with just a little bit of vignette, just a tiny little bit there, and seeing what happens. There is quite a bit of flare going up here, and this is where the sun's coming through those branches up there. One of your decisions would have to be, do we actually keep that in or not? So let's just make a virtual copy and come in with the crop and just come down a little bit and take out some of that up the top. And I'm just going to add a little bit more darkness up there in some of the blacks and the shadows. Maybe too much. Okay, now let's just look at those side by side and see whether that actually helps or not, whether we want to have that lovely strong brightness at the top. Now that I've taken some off the top, I feel I'd like to take a little bit off the bottom as well. And where's that button? That's it there. I should learn the shortcut for that, shouldn't I? How's that going? I think I've just come in too hard with the top, haven't I? So we can just go back to the that mask. That's one of the beautiful things about this, isn't it? Is that we can lighten that, where I've maybe come in a little bit too heavy with it. fantastic. Yeah, I think that one, that's quite lovely. And there's the other version there. Didn't really need very much, did it, to bring that up into something so beautiful. All right. Let's have a look, and let's just do one more processing. And let's have a look at this one. This one's by Sonia. Quite a interesting photograph there. As we're looking at it, one of my considerations is, does this branch in the front that's a little bit out of focus take my attention away from the excitement of the waterfall? And if by playing with that, can we actually do something else with that? So let's go in there and have a look. Turn out the lights. And let's come in here really strongly and have another look at making that other part the hero. I might be able just to clone that out a little bit. It's easier to crop it out. Let's have a let's see if we are able to knock that out. Oh, that did a pretty good job there, didn't it? That was pretty easy. Oh. Just put a little bit of a reverse curve in. And what I'm trying to do there is just see if I can get a little bit more of that texture in the waterfall there without darkening off too much. And we could just try a nice big radial gradient through that middle bit. Ooh. And just see if we can get I like what that's doing, but I don't like what it's doing to the blacks. So let's just open those back up a little bit. There we go. Ah, how's that? That's quite beautiful, isn't it? Oh, that's nice. I really like that. Let's just try one other thing. Let's see if we can emphasize this little stick here just a little bit more. And we're going to do that by just pulling in the blacks just a little bit on it. Maybe even giving it just a touch more texture. See if we can get some of that attention down there. Oh, that's quite nice. I'd like to attend to those. And I wonder what colour they are. So we can always go back and we can see they're green and yellow. What happens if we turn down the greens and yellows a little bit? That's looking quite nice, isn't it? I just want to hold the eye at the very, very top, and to do that I'm just going to put a little bit of a and you can see I'm softening it up there, and I'm trying to get it in that spot just there, and I just want to darken that a little bit. Just to bring the eyes down. You'll notice that a lot of the things we're doing are very, very, very subtle. Just to bring the eye down a little bit and bring us in. We're very close with this one now, aren't we? Now, remember, as I'm doing this and playing around with other people's work, and that there's no right answer. It's a matter of processing to taste. I really love, Michael Reichman used to say, it's a matter of, you know, how much you would like to add. It's like a salt and pepper. We each add a different amount, and we process things our own way. And so in me doing this, I'm just processing these as if they're my photographs, and just seeing where they go. And we're doing this so that people see other ways of doing things, analysing their work in a different way. It's a way of offering a suggestion. In no way is it a way of saying this is how it must be. There's so many different ways of doing things like this. Well, I think on that note, it's time for a change. All right. Border Patrol. Border Patrol.
Oh wait, sorry. I'm about to go back to the beginning because I pressed the wrong mute button for the mic. I didn't get it till just then.
Oh, okay.
Tell Judy about that when I'm second.
We'll start that again. We're apologies, we didn't have sound going there somehow. Anyway, that's why we're doing a trial run with these things. So I would like to welcome you to a segment, compositional ideas and short little snippets to play with. And the very first one we're going to call Border Patrol. And this term was actually coined by one of my students, Pam, and she actually made a note and put it on the back of the camera, Border Patrol, and it was her way of reminding herself to check the edges. And why is it important to check the edges? Well, cleaner edges equals better photographs. And her way of remembering this was the term Border Patrol. Now, I want to put up a photograph, and we're going to illustrate and talk about this through photographs. And here we can actually see, this is I love this photograph, and it's taken out at on the other side of Broken Hill, actually in South Australia. I hadn't been to South Australia at that time ever in my life, so I actually made sure I drove across the border into there. And I saw this beautiful little hill and this gorgeous little tree on it. And my composition was very much dictated by what was happening just out of frame underneath the bottom of it. And then you can see that there isn't much else happening throughout the whole of the photograph. So my border control was really about, in this image, that very, very bottom edge. On a side note, I really disliked this image at first because I couldn't capture the absolute perfect curve in that I could see with my eyes, and no matter where I stood, it started disappearing there. This is also out in central New South Wales or western New South Wales. This is taken at Chinaman's, I can't remember the rest of that, in Lake Mungo, there just above Mildura, between Mildura and Broken Hill. And here, Border Patrol means that I've left out of the frame that tin can, that fence post, that piece of grass, and made sure that I have incredibly clean edges all the way around. So Border Patrol is so much about looking for distractions and keeping our attention in the photograph. Now, Larry Fink is one of my favourite photographers, and in his book, published by Aperture, he says, the edges are always important in a picture. And we must remember that. And we use the edges and the corners to push the conceptual centre, to push the viewer's eyes to the conceptual centre of the image or the frame. Not the physical the centre, but where the attention goes. And so when I'm taking a photograph like this, and this is a Stack Island down at Kiama there, and I can't wait to get back down there. I've got to be very careful with these rocks, haven't I? And this leading sweeping curve that wanders off back into the distance. I actually sold a couple of these down in Kiama. I printed them 1 metre square and had them framed, and they're absolutely stunning. So my Border Patrol is making sure that I don't have distractions, and that the viewer's eye is going to continue down that path and around that curve and out into the ocean. I've almost created an S or a Z shape there, haven't I, as things wander back through Border Patrol. Look, here's Stack Island. Here when I'm photographing, I'm on the beach at the boat ramp there at Minamurra, and I've got trees behind me. I've got a fixed lens, so I can't zoom in and out. All I can do is move left and right and my camera up and down, and this is where I've decided to create my image. And I'm using a lot of the water in the foreground, a lovely long exposure to soften it, and a little arrow there on the right hand side pushing in to that island. I actually often think of this one as, Evel Knievel driving along on his little motorbike and trying to hit Stack Island and clear the water and land on the other side. So there's somewhere for the viewer's eye to go and land as it moves across. So when you're doing border patrol, one of the tricks, and this is a really beautiful trick, and my dear friend in the UK actually pointed it out for me, and I've got a blank on his name, I'll come back to that he frames from the corner. And as soon as he said that, I went, duh, of course I do that too, and I hadn't really become aware of that as a way of framing, starting from a corner. And so here, as I frame up this particular photograph, I will start down in one of the corners, and in this case probably the right hand corner, and I'm noticing a little bit of dark spots, and then going up to the top right hand side to make sure that I've got a bit of darkness up there to hold and to frame the eye in. This is from our book Dances with Trees, and here she is having a lovely dance with some trees. And again, I've actually started my framing from the lower right hand corner down the bottom there, and then I've got that flow going up through that tree and then up to the top left hand side. And so that balance between the left and the right in this image is incredibly important for me. Here, this is in the Tarkine, this is at Dip Falls. Actually, we took a tour group there over the last few years. Here I've used a very, very strong leading line coming out of one of the corners. So balancing that bottom right-hand corner with the corner on the left-hand side, and then hopefully getting the right edge at the top, and in particular the top left-hand corner. So framing up like this, starting at a corner, is an absolutely beautiful place to do it. And the gentleman is Mark Littlejohn, and I'm sure that you are well aware of his work. His work is in Len's Journal, Volume 1, Issue 1, to launch the journal off in. Now this one's down in Kiama as well, and again, as I'm framing up, I'm actually starting from that arrow that is being created in the lower right hand corner. And then my next point of reference is the left hand side. I'm trying to create a bit of a natural vignette there. And then across the top, I'm trying very hard to cut the clouds off without chopping through a bright highlight in the cloud and giving the clouds just that little bit of space to breathe across the top. So rather than pointing my camera out into the scene, I'm starting framing up from the corners. And here's another lovely example. This time I've got the leading line coming out of the lower left-hand corner, and up on the top there I'm also making very much careful selection not to have the top of the cloud running through the top of the frame. There's a nice open space around that, and to control that I move my camera back and forth, tilting it and raising the height and moving it this way and up and down until I get the bottom edge, the two corners and the top all in their space. And I don't even think or worry about what's happening in the middle. So my advice to you is either start in a corner or start from one great edge. Like here, the great edge is the bottom of the photograph. And here I've decided to make that dark band virtually the same thickness as that white band. And decision making done, and then I move around to put the tree where I go from there. Even in a more abstract artwork, I'm still working from the edges, from the bottom and from the top. And here, this is, you know, half a minute of actual lots of camera movement, and I'm working between two headlands and coming right around and keeping the darks from the two headlands. I'm consciously working from the two sides to try and keep dark spots around the edges to keep the viewer in the middle of the photograph. Here I start from the left-hand side and the bottom right-hand side, and I get those two sorted, and I love to have a bit of a base in the bottom of my photograph to add a little bit of weight, and I frame from the lower left corner and the left and the bottom sides. Here I started with the bottom edge of the photograph, and then I created the space to that reflection to the log so that we have a rhythm going up, and then I moved left to right and tried to balance the two sides, and then that strange rhomboid sort of shape in the background there works oh so beautifully. So part of playing with your border control is having natural vignettes. So as I'm framing up, I'm actually trying to create a natural vignette with what's going on. And you can see in these photographs, I've actually put dark rocks or pieces around the edges to hold it. And even when we go into a flower like this, you can see that I'm trying very hard to keep the viewer's attention in the middle of the photograph. So here, the border control is incredibly important. I think now I'm looking at this, I could go and tidy up some of those little bright spots around the edges, couldn't I? Although, personally, if I do that too much, I find that they become overworked. So, to finish up this little segment, check your edges. You know, if it means writing out and putting a little note on your camera to remind yourself, a little post-it note on the back. It's really fascinating. In my time as a large format photographer, my work became sloppy and not as high quality the moment I forgot to check my edges. And always before I pressed the shot, I had this habit of running my eye all around the edges to check for distractions. And you can see in these works here, I've worked very, very hard to make sure that my edges, as Larry Fink would say, all point in to the theoretical main subject. So, go on border patrol. Thank you. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to do with 5 to 10 minutes, but anyway. Let's have a go. Well, I thought you might like to know what happened with my Leica M10 monochrome. I've had this camera for just under a year, and I wanted to share with you what it was like owning such a camera and using it and having a play with it. And you can see here how beautiful it is. I've got a lovely selection of Voigtlander lenses that I use with it and play with. And I must admit, it does work better with a smaller, a lovely lens on it rather than one of the bigger ones. One of the things is when you go to take a photograph, you often forget to take the lens cap off because you can actually see through the viewfinder. So this is a rangefinder camera. It's got a monochrome sensor. You focus as you're focusing, and it's got a what's called a rangefinder patch, and you have a double image, and as you're focusing they move across each other until they're lined up, and then you know that you have your camera in focus. And if you have verticals, you turn the camera on its side to you need a vertical line to really see what's going on, and it can be incredibly hard to focus. Now, this camera has an incredibly beautiful feel in your hand. It does remind me of my Olympus OM1 that I actually grew up on with as a camera, and it's it's well known that Olympus actually made their camera a similar size. Whether it's by theft or not, we don't know, but Leica got upset with them, and Olympus actually had to change the name from an M1, because this is an M series Leica, to an OM1. Anyway, it's a beautiful camera to hold in your hand, and the buttons and the feel is quite beautiful. And at first I thought it would be a little bit slippery without actually having that fancy grip that modern cameras have that wrap around your hands. But in all honesty, I've never found it a problem. Mind you, I'm always using a straps to make sure I don't drop it, but it feels absolutely gorgeous. In fact, it feels so beautiful that I have no other camera that I could compare in terms of the quality and the build quality of it. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it feels nice and heavy in your hands. Okay, one of the things you'll notice as you're looking at it, and maybe I can put it down here and you can see as you're looking at how minimal things are. There's 3 buttons down the side at the back, and this wheel and points on the right there. The screen's actually fixed. There's the viewfinder. There is this little adjustment wheel. I have that set to exposure compensation. On the top we have the shutter speed to move around. Here on the left hand side we have the ISO, and then the aperture is set on the lens, and then we have the focusing here. So all of the controls are manual, and really this is such a beautiful manual lens to work with, or manual camera to work with. Interestingly, that because it shoots in black and white, you don't have very much control over the tonal rendering of different colors as they get converted into monochrome. And the way to handle that, and I'm just going to slide these in so you can see, is to carry a whole box of filters and change this rendition. And this is quite hard work to do this, and you have to actually think about what it's going to look like before you take the photograph. And my favourite are these 2 orange ones, which I virtually left on this particular lens all the time. Now in the specs they don't tell you that when you do that and you put a filter like this particular one on, you're actually going to lose a number of stops of light. So one of the advantages of having a monochrome sensor is how well it sees in the dark. And if you start putting these filters on, you're actually going to start losing some of that advantage there. The other problem with a monochrome sensor is there's no room in highlights to bring in extra tone back in. In a Bayer sensor with the different colors, we might start clipping one of the channels, but the other channel might still have a little bit of data, and we can actually see that in a monochrome work. So when this camera hits white, it absolutely hits pure white, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I found myself pretty consistently underexposing with it for most of the time that I was using it. There's one thing I did wish for, and that was a spot meter. This has an averaging meter that is actually set into the shutter of the camera, and you can actually see that if you take that off. See those lovely shades of grey and white? That's bouncing off into the meter to do the meter reading, to make it register from the middle of the view. So that actually is quite an averaging system, and there were many times where I wished I had more of a spot system. Now that's actually on the M11, which is a camera I'm tempted to trade this in for, and I haven't really fully made up my mind for it. This camera seems to work best with a wide-angle lens, zone focusing using the focusing scale, and wandering around and shooting in the streets. And that's why it is really a camera loved by street photographers. The big advantage is that the viewfinder that you're looking through here and here actually shows the image outside of the area that's going to be photographed, and you're just looking through a piece of glass. So when you press the shutter, the only thing that you know that you've pressed it is the sound of the click. There's no other indication, so there's no blackout, and if someone's about to walk in or walk out of frame, you can track them in the viewfinder and then see what's going on. Well, really the best thing to do is to show you some of the photographs from it and have a look. So let's come over to my computer here and have a look at some of the images. There's my glasses so I can see what I'm doing. Now, this is quite personal, sharing my work from a camera with you for over such a long period of time, because there's very few works that I'm absolutely in love with, and this is one of them. So that's where we're going to start, and I do love the depth of field that a fast lens has. You see it works quite well shooting into the sun and doing some of those sort of things. It's just a few of my ones that I loved that I took with the camera. I found it very hard to shoot square with it, trying to guess where square was, and actually these are just cropped in. I actually found the accuracy of the frame lines in the rangefinder quite difficult to work with, mainly because I've been using mirrorless cameras, and I have a lovely square frame, and I can see incredibly accurately where my edges are. And so what actually happened as I was shooting with this camera is I noticed I started to shoot a bit wider, and then later I came in with some of the cropping. And you know, my love for having really beautiful edges really started to struggle with using a much more vaguer rangefinder. The rangefinder is set for 2 meters, so when you're working at affinity, there is going to be some things that are, it's going to be out a little bit. As you focus it, there is a bit of movement to account for parallax error, but still I was shooting quite wide. Now, one of the beautiful things with this camera is how much you can dig into the shadows and see the same photograph just opening up the shadows, and you can see there's an incredible amount of detail there. In fact, so much that I think you'd have to go to a medium format camera to get anywhere near as close, and I think that would be an interesting war of the camera. And this allows me to shoot something like this, exposing for the sky in the background, and then opening up the shadows later to see what's there. And you can see that I'm still getting same tree, same day, same exposure. I'm keeping the beautiful clouds and able to open up the shadows into the tree. And here's a really, really beautiful example of that. I don't think I've really had a camera before that had that much depth to it. Like here's a Leica SL2S, and I open up the shadows, and you can see immediately we don't have that same incredible depth that we have on the monochrome Leica. Here's another example of lifting the shadows, and this is in the Tarkine in Tasmania, shooting there in these beautiful, they call them man ferns down there. We need to find a better name than king and man ferns, don't we? But no, that's what they're called. Here it is opening up the shadows. And because we don't have the Bayer array, the megapixels are so much sharper, and we have so much incredible detail available to us. You see, these are some of the photographs that I actually loved from this camera. Beautiful. Now, for me, the camera really shined when I took it to art galleries and went out at night and started photographing at people. This is down at the art gallery, the Victorian National Gallery it's called. While we're in, I went to the queer exhibition, and here you can see this beautiful dress, and you can see the lovely detail in the blacks, and I really loved using it in and amongst people because I could watch them come in and out of the frame. And yeah, these artworks were fantastic to look at, and quite fascinating to see the modern gaze at the male figure here, very much a part of the queer community. Here's in another section of the gallery. This artist is obviously making quite a poignant comment about Captain Cook there. Here, even though I'm photographing the artwork, I'm able to keep an eye on this person and get them looking in with that incredibly inquisitive look. And this is where I really enjoyed this camera, and I really think I need to add a much wider angle lens to play with it. Now, here's my mate Eric playing with another Leica, and here he is shooting through, and this is me photographing with the monochrome, and you can see it's overexposed a little bit there, and there's nothing I can do to bring back those bright spots in his hair and on his hand. That detail is actually gone, and we're going to patent that shooting with your tongue out approach for future. And here he is actually holding the camera, and I'm shooting it with a different camera. And this is just to compare, for me, the difference in the rendering of the skin tones. And with the monochrome, that relationship is set, and that's why I ended up putting the orange filter on for so much of the work. Here you can see that lovely soft background, and I quite love the work that it does with people. And here's the rendering with the other camera shooting back, and you'll notice that the skin tones are quite different, and the tonal relationships are very different. Here's a shot Eric has taken of me back when I had my beard out and my hair was a little bit longer. And here I get to shoot him. One of the benefits of this camera is its high ISO performance. It's quite happy to shoot at 50,000 ISO, particularly for something that you might share on the web, or if you print it, you can actually explore the beautiful grain that comes with it. Here's Jack. This is down in Tasmania, inside in the building, while we're sitting around playing with our cameras. And I really think that this is the moment that this particular camera shines. There's Jim there. This is on our Tarkine tour. And it renders so beautifully people in this beautiful monochrome. There's Hazel as we're heading off out to Sundowner Point, wandering through the bush. And here's Hazel and Claire. And this is where this camera really shines. It's when you can see incredibly beautiful monochrome compositions that are formed around light. And here we really see how this light's bouncing off Claire's face and putting that lovely rim light around Hazel there. Beautiful. And just to, as we're finishing up, I do want to show you what happens. Like, this is actually using the camera virtually in the dark to see, and you can actually see some of the grain pattern there. And this is what happens when I do push it up to 50,000 ISO. One of my ideas with this camera was to be able to go and photograph at night. And here as the sun rises and the ISO starts to drop back, we can actually see the photographs getting crisper and cleaner. And these are handheld. I didn't need to use a tripod to do these in this very early misty morning. Here I am actually shooting at night under moonlight with some lights shining up into the frame. I took the camera out to Vivid and had a bit of a play, and I'm pushing my processing and this high ISO to see what I can do and whether I'm really happy with it as a camera. And here these people are lit by the lights in the Vivid Photo Festival, and you can actually see some of the texture from the high ISO, and it actually is quite beautiful and works for this sort of photograph very well. I do have to laugh at this one, the three round spheres all shining in the bright light there. Beautiful. Another one of the photographs that I love from this camera. And you can see working at night, up close and in the light, that this is where it actually absolutely shines. All of these are taken at night. And if the light's bright enough, we're getting here incredibly clean, sharp images, which I'm very, very pleased with. Very, very pleased with. One of the joys of photographing at night is everyone is under the cover of darkness, and they don't really know what you're up to with the photography. Look at it shooting out into the night sky with all these buildings beautifully lit up. And this is really where one of the areas where this camera shines. So if you can actually see what it is, and we have this incredibly beautiful monochromatic composition, this camera just works something beautifully. And to compare it to something, I bought the Leica SL2S so I could use it in the dark as well. And here I'm comparing the two at high ISO. And here we can really see that the grain has such a different pattern to it. Now here I am shooting out onto a beach in the middle of the night, handheld, pushing the camera to see what I can do. And the comparison is really in the difference in the grain and the rendering, and they do render quite differently. And so you can easily see why people particularly love the monochrome camera, because it does render these tones oh so beautifully. And there we are shooting up to the Milky Way, and we can clearly see it handheld in that camera. And but the actual texture, it's really too much for me, and to do these I really need to put it on a tripod and bring the ISO back down again and do them again. Here we are back with the Leica M10 monochrome, pushing the bounds of it to see what happens and to play, and actually I do quite like this photograph. There is quite an interesting texture coming up when I'm working at these really, really high ISOs. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And then once I actually get a little bit more light in there, things start working really, really well. Well, I really love this camera, and I'm really having a hard time deciding whether I should sell it and pick up a Leica M11 so I actually have the color files. I must admit I prefer processing from the color files and having my own mix and not having to carry around all those filters that I showed you before. And then, you know, its ability to work at night is something that I will miss. So I'm still stuck in my conundrum as to whether to keep it or whether to sell it. So anyway, I can spend a little bit more time thinking about that. And here, this is one of my favorite photographs with this camera. And when I get it working and I'm very happy with it, the results are absolutely beautiful. A gorgeous camera. Thank you. All right. We go back to the other camera. Well, that's it for our first live stream event. It seems I ramble on longer than I ever planned for, and maybe I need to cut my slides in half, and we'll eventually get down to my goal of 5 and 7 minute segments. But I do hope you enjoyed, and I do hope you come back every 2 months as we record again, and we get better at working this out. And of course, as we progress, there'll be more diversity in each show. We did a lot of processing today, so that we could actually test everything out and see how things go. So please let us know what you think, and we'll start putting out the short episodes once we launch. So thank you for joining us, and bye.